Greetings and welcome to another edition of Montpelier Connection. I'm State Representative Mike Mrowicki, representing the Wyndham 4 District of Putney, Dummerston, Westminster. And today, the senior member of the Wyndham 4 District, David Deen, here is our guest. Welcome, David.
Thank you. Thanks for the invitation to talk with you again.
Yep. And you are indeed the Dean of the House as far as I'm concerned. Mm-hmm. And even though you're not exactly the longest.
Yeah, that belongs to Representative Emmons from Springfield. One term longer than me.
Yep. Yep. Well, thank you for taking the time here. We are heading into the 2016 legislative session. But in the 2015 session, you did an amazing amount of work, culminating really decades of work in trying to protect the water quality of our state. And there's a lot of emphasis on what happens in the Burlington area, Lake Champlain, but this water bill encompasses the whole state, right?
Correct. As many people know, in my professional life, I'm the river steward for the Connecticut River and its watershed in both Vermont and New Hampshire. And as we were working on the what I call the Vermont Clean Water Act this past year, it was important to me, and I made sure that others understood the importance of making it a statewide bill, meaning that the provisions of the bill relating to agriculture, activities that affect water quality, and municipal and development activities that affect water quality applied across the board in all of the major watersheds in Vermont. Part of the reason that it was, if you will, reasonable to do that was that cleaning up Lake Champlain is following the plan that was required by EPA. Because of nutrient loading in Lake Champlain, it was not meeting the Vermont water quality standards. It simply was not. There was blue-green algae. People couldn't swim in it. They certainly couldn't drink it. We had fish kills and we had other environmental impacts from what was going on up there. But Lake Champlain is not the only major watershed in the state of Vermont that has similar problems. Lake Memphremagog watershed, and for those of you that know it, there's a book entitled Where the Rivers Flow North, up in the Northeast Kingdom of the state. They have already started developing a cleanup plan for Memphremagog, Lake Memphremagog and its watershed. And the Connecticut River, Long Island Sound, has a cleanup plan that EPA is requiring the states to meet, and it is beginning to reach into Vermont and New Hampshire. There are two really serendipitous and good things about the work that we did. First off, not only is it statewide in terms of impact on watersheds, but when you do good things for the river in terms of water quality, in many cases you also do good things for infrastructure relative to high water events. All of us remember Irene. Well, those culverts and bridges and items that are what we consider infrastructure that were built to withstand flooding are also river friendly. And so there is a benefit, a sort of a double benefit for taking on those kinds of projects. The bill put in place the requirement that agriculture and municipalities and developers begin to move forward in terms of cleaning up their discharges to the waters of the state. And we put in place a dedicated revenue source to be able to help farmers and towns and other municipalities and developers be able to meet their responsibilities under the Vermont water quality standards. So the bottom line for a lot of the work that we did, culminating in the act that passed last year, but starting 15 years ago, a lot of what we did that culminated last year was a win-win-win situation.
Yeah.
Win for the rivers, win for infrastructure for high water events, and a win for those of us who really enjoy outdoors on our rivers and streams and ponds and lakes.
Well, in some places, I was reading, the problem has gotten to the part where some towns along Lake Champlain are devaluing land that's on the lakefront because the pollution has gotten to that point where it's hurting business, hurting tourism. So it's certainly a time for action. Now, one of the things that I've been asked about is Lake Champlain is bordered by both New York and Quebec province. The Lake Memphremagog crosses the border into Canada, into Quebec province. The Connecticut River goes through New Hampshire,
4 states.
Connecticut, Massachusetts, and is Vermont the only one doing anything about this, or is this work being done in conjunction with these other states and provinces?
In terms of Lake Champlain, the state of New York has a plan very similar to what has now been adopted in Vermont, and Quebec has been an active partner. They've really only got one major tributary coming into the northern lake, but they have been an active partner working with their farmers and mostly farmers, because that's really an agricultural area up there. So in terms of Lake Champlain, yes, other jurisdictions that contribute to the problem are working to clean it up. So it's not just Vermont that's stepping up to the plate and addressing water quality issues. In terms of Memphremagog, again, it's Quebec. They have an active program. The problem is, because of the way the lake is situated, those rivers running north. It's the Black River and the other rivers that run through Glastonbury and all of the heavy agricultural areas in the Northeast Kingdom. And we're going to help agriculture address those problems. In terms of the Connecticut River, EPA, who is overseeing the cleanup plan for Long Island Sound, is making sure that all the states are doing their fair share. Now, quite honestly, Vermont and New Hampshire contribute 5% of the nitrogen loading, which is the problem in the Connecticut River going down to Long Island Sound, and it is a dead zone in Long Island Sound that this cleanup plan is trying to address.
From nitrogen?
From nitrogen, as opposed to phosphorus, which is the problem with both the Memphremagog watershed and the Champlain watershed. And the reason is nitrogen is the limiting nutrient in salt water. And of course, Long Island Sound is a saltwater body of water. Right now, EPA, in terms of the Connecticut River, is really only addressing municipal discharges. And they are requiring both Vermont and New Hampshire wastewater treatment facilities to design and eventually adopt and fund nutrient nitrogen reduction plans as part of their permit renewals. All of these plants have a 5-year life on the length of the permit that they have. So as part of the renewal, as these plans come up for renewal, is that they have a nitrogen reduction plan. I've been monitoring the plans that have been coming in, and it isn't going to be cheap, but again, that is exactly the reason that at least Vermont has put in place this Clean Water Fund to assist municipalities in addressing that problem. No other state that I'm aware of has actually taken that step at this point. They're relying on federal dollars and existing state dollars in their budgets. The other issue that is related is what's known as combined sewer overflows. And those are discharges that are not treated at the wastewater treatment plants because they are simply overwhelmed by the flow of water during high water events. I intend to introduce legislation this year that will make upgrading and changing those combined sewer overflow situations so that that no longer happens, and making those activities eligible for funding under our revolving loan program. Sounds like it's really in the weeds, but what it comes down to is money. The federal government, beginning in 1972, put a lot of money behind the Federal Clean Water Act, and that put many plants online for the first time. Over the ensuing years, the federal government has walked away from its responsibility to clean water. That, of course, puts the responsibility at the state and local level. And I congratulate Vermont, both the state and the municipalities, for the work that they've done. But just recently, over the last 10 days, there have been 2 combined sewer discharges to the Connecticut River, one from Brattleboro, one from Windsor, of over 200,000 gallons of untreated sewage. The systems were not properly designed. They were the best systems at the time when they were built, but they were not properly designed in order to handle all of the flow that comes from roadways and other sources. So we're going to rebuild some infrastructure to help with the problem in all 3 of the major watersheds in the state.
One of the concerns that I've heard have been from municipalities and farmers saying, we all agree, but this can be financially onerous for us. So you're saying there is funding available that can help?
That's what we designed the Clean Water Fund to be able to do. In terms of agriculture, from the federal level through the federal farm bill, both Lake Champlain, that will be receiving some $60 million of assistance over the next 5 years, and the Connecticut River, that will be receiving $10 million over the next 5 years. Agriculture needs, if you will, lesser amounts of state dollars in order to be able to address some of their problems.
Now, if individual farmers or towns want to know how to get in touch with people for assistance on this, where do they go to the same place? Who do they contact?
Well, I think most municipalities with wastewater treatment facilities are in touch with the Department of Environmental Conservation. They understand and they are communicating on a regular basis. In terms of roads, regional commissions are going to be in the lead for the state in terms of dealing with transportation and addressing transportation issues relative to clean water. And I just wanted to add, I didn't mention it earlier, but we created the Clean Water Fund with a dedicated source of funding that will help municipalities. We also, the legislature and the governor put this year an additional $1 million into assisting municipalities addressing clean water issues. And next year, they are slated to get $2 million additional dollars over and above what they get for the Roads and Bridges program. So we're trying to marshal resources into those areas that don't have a lot of federal assistance.
Yeah. And farmers?
Well, the NRCS program, Natural Resources Conservation Service, listed under USDA in the phone book. Yeah. I would get in touch with them. They are the implementers of the federal assistance dollars that are coming into the state, and that's both in the Connecticut River and watershed and in the other 2, Memphremagog and Lake Champlain. So for ag, Natural Resources Conservation Service, for municipalities, DEC and the permitting process for their discharge permits, and for roads and infrastructure questions, the regional planning commissions.
Yeah.
And actually, I think most municipalities are aware that
Yep.
the regional planning commissions have for years been a source of assistance for transportation and infrastructure assistance.
Yep. And I noticed when the Vermont League of Cities and Towns put out their legislative priorities, this was one of the issues that they want to keep focused on, is promoting water quality and also making sure municipalities get those resources they need. I watched you for years pushing for this bill, and in this last session, you did some amazing work to get this bill, first of all, out of the House, and then, of course, we have to go over to the other body, and you did it. So congratulations.
Yeah, and thank you, because I've worked very hard on this for a long time, but you never do something alone in the legislature.
Well, that's where I watched you also make these alliances, working with people. When issues came up, you were right there to address it. You had people working with you, and it was really quite a exhibit of building consensus, building alliances, statesmanship.
Thank you.
as you went through, because it's not always easy.
Yeah,
There was a lot of pushback from people who said, yes, we want this, but it's going to cost money and we can't afford it.
Right. In previous years, the pushback stopped this from moving forward.
Yeah.
I mean, and because there wasn't the legislative initiatives and the administration were not on the same page, and municipalities and agriculture, I mean, everybody was, sort of, it's their fault. It's not it's their fault. And between the change in administration, and I want to thank our governor and the people that he put in place over the last 6 years, and we stopped this. It's them, not us. We stopped it and said, okay, let's take a look at the problem. What do we need to do to protect people's investments in their homes along Lake Champlain, their investments in their businesses throughout the state of Vermont? And once we understood that, then we said, okay, put a price tag on it. And we did that. And that scared the bejesus out of everybody, but we had to know the size of the problem. And even when we got the news that it was going to be a lot of money every year for 10 years in order to do it, people said, yeah, but let's try prioritizing, and let's target particular places, right down to the farm fields that are causing the biggest problem. And we think that we've done that with this initiative, and having everybody come together, agriculture, municipalities, with us, and helping them understand, look, we're not blaming anybody, all right? We have a problem, and we need to deal with it. And Vermont's a community, and we came together, so there was all of that energy behind the effort this past year, also. But it felt really nice to be at the signing of the bill, albeit it was on the shores of Lake Champlain, and watch the governor put this thing in motion by signing that legislation.
And that's my next question. Okay, here's the bill, and the next step is actually bringing it to life. Is that what part of next session is going to be about for you?
Quite honestly, it has never stopped. All of the committee leadership from the various committees, not just the chairs, although the chairs have been involved, from both the House and the Senate, have been meeting on a regular basis with the administration, environmental conservation, agriculture, food and markets, Department of Agency of Transportation, Agency of Community Development. We have all been continuing to work in a cooperative manner in order to make sure that we implement this, first off, as quickly as possible, and secondly, that we do it right. And again, I compliment all of us for having committed the time. Now, for the administration and the agencies and whatever, it's their job. I mean, they're supposed to do it. Those of us who are volunteer citizen legislators, I would like to thank members of my committee and members of the Senate committee and others who have continued, the Ag Committee in the House and in the Senate, who have continued to meet with the administration to see that what is public policy gets implemented in an effective and, well, quickly and effectively.
Yeah.
We will have to do some things, major piece of legislation. I've never been involved with one before, and as you've never been involved with one, that you didn't have to go back and take a look at some things that, you know what, we thought this was going to get us there. It's not quite, and it's got unintended consequences. We may have to change some stuff. But right now, the list is not long in terms of what we're going to look at this coming session.
Are there other issues that you'll be looking at that you have on the agenda already, or are you still working on building that?
There are a couple of things. Our threatened and endangered species law here in the state of Vermont in large measure mirrors the federal threatened and endangered species protections. But there are some things missing in Vermont's statute, and so we are going to address that. And again, members of my committee have been working with the administration to develop a piece of legislation that will address sort of filling in some of those gaps. An example being that there's nothing in the Vermont statute that gives our Agency of Natural Resources the authority to protect habitats. Now, you can't go out and shoot an endangered species, but if you wipe out their habitat, it has the same effect.
You bet.
And so we're, that's the kind of issue that we're going to take a look at.
And one of the concerns I've heard about in terms of development is the way habitat gets fractured and fragmented, which is harming the ecosystem that is bringing everything together.
Our Secretary of the Agency of Natural Resources does not have the authority to be able to address that. Sometimes larger developments going through Act 250, our land use development law, those developers do have to address fractured habitat. But when it happens on a piecemeal kind of basis and nobody's watching and something is necessary in order to protect habitat for bats, as an example that I know you're concerned about.
Bats that eat mosquitoes, you mean?
That eat mosquitoes, that's absolutely right. But they're under such pressure because of the white nose syndrome that their habitat in a piecemeal basis, they can't absorb that additional pressure.
There's a bill that you are one of the main sponsors of, and I am one of the 20 or so co-sponsors of, that's getting a lot of attention right now. For those of us who believe climate change is real and humans have a big part in what happens, reducing our carbon footprint is an important piece of what we want to go forward. You're one of the lead sponsors of a bill which would help address that, and there's starting to be some misunderstandings already, some pushback. We've got a few minutes left. Can you just give us a brief overview of what the carbon tax?
Yeah, it's a carbon tax bill, as I understand it from some of the information that's coming to me now, because I have been paying attention to what's been going on over in Paris relative to cooperation between nations around the world, is that they in fact endorsed the notion of a carbon tax and did it on a worldwide basis. That hasn't answered all of the questions that people have. One of the things that it's really important that people understand, the concept behind the bill that we introduced is that it is revenue neutral. And so as soon as I came back to Vermont, I asked Ledge Council to start working with me to draft a revenue neutral bill.
Are other states doing this as well? You said this was a national conference.
Yeah, it was a national conference, and unfortunately, there are only a few initiatives, and they're mostly out in the Northwest.
Yeah.
One of the things that I was hoping that this caucus of environmental legislators was going to help me to do was to get similar legislation introduced in all the New England states.
Yeah.
At that national conference, New England, and with Vermont in its particular role in leadership, our notion of the regional initiative on greenhouse gas, better known as RGGI, is the envy of the entire country.
Yeah.
And this would have been another leadership role for this area of the country to play. Unfortunately, they didn't have the capacity, and as, again, a volunteer legislator, I certainly don't have the capacity to be able to do that. But I continue to talk with my colleagues in other states, and if we can get, what would you say, a critical mass of New England states, we might be able to move forward as a region.
Now, something similar has been already in place out in British Columbia. Is this something that we're going to look at as a model? Because it sounds like it's working out there.
Quite honestly, the legislation I introduced in terms of the methods for determining the level of taxation for carbon emissions is based on that.
Yeah.
It is working. It has not been a disaster for their economy. Quite honestly, they're a much larger entity and jurisdiction than we are, but they're not larger than New England.
Yeah.
And so it becomes a matter of having a scale and scope in terms of what you're offering. But yeah, it was based on that model, and we know it works because it's working.
Yep. Well, thank you for your leadership on that, and we look forward to see that we can get it through both houses. And the governor's on board for this?
I'm not entirely sure that I would say that.
Okay.
But he is willing to continue talking about it, and that is not a no.
Yeah.
Just means I intend to be cautious.
Yeah. We need to see what's actually in the bill, right? As we say.
Yeah.
Well, we're about out of time, but I appreciate again you taking the time out of your day, and before you know it, we'll be back up in Montpelier and working together.
And back at it, and I will be glad to be there working with you. Happy holidays to everybody who's out there and might be looking at this.
Yep.
And I'm looking forward to getting back there.
Yep. And we are taping this on the solstice.
Yes.
So the light will be returning, and we're looking forward to that as well. So thank you, David.
Thank you.
And thank you to all the people here at BCTV for once again helping bring our work from Montpelier closer to you at home. If you want to get in touch with us, if you have ideas, suggestions, questions, they will be showing our contact information. It's also available on the legislative website if you want to get in touch with David, myself, or any of your local legislators. We'll be joining you again up in Montpelier before you know it, but before then, I want to wish everybody happy holidays. And until next time, this is Mike Mrowicki. Take care now.